add until top of 4 circle, use scoop to measure water. That's good. It works. It works. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to Honeycomb. My name is Kayo, and today we're going to be doing something with the Aeropress that I'm going to call the anti-ultimate recipe. So what does that mean? Well, when we're making coffee, we tend to use a lot of scales. We say that this is super important. We have tools like this Brewista kettle. If you haven't seen our review of this kettle and a number of other kettles, we have a link up here or down in the comments. And kettles like this cost around 8 to 10,000 pesos. In fact, the scales also they could cost as little as 1,000 pesos, but all the way up to, 12, 15,000 pesos. This scale in particular costs, I believe, around 8,000 pesos. I kind of felt like it was anti what the Aeropress stood for, because it's such a simple, straightforward, inexpensive device. So I thought, hey, is it possible to make a consistently great Aeropress coffee using only what you get in the Aeropress box? So what do you get in the Aeropress box? I got one recently, and what came was the Aeropress, of course. The plunger, the body, and the filter cap. It came with a bunch of filters. It came with a funnel, and it came with a scoop, and that's it. My particular Aeropress did not come with a paddle to agitate with. In theory, you could use anything. You could use a spoon, and for our purposes today, the only extra piece of equipment that we're going to use is this chopstick. So I'm going to add the chopstick to the things we're going to use today. So what I want to do is I want to be able to take my scoop that I got with the Aeropress, scoop out some coffee into my grinder, grind the coffee, and then hopefully be able to brew the coffee without needing to weigh anything more than just the scoop. Now, in theory, I could use the scoop to get a ratio, meaning I could put my coffee in there and then use the same scoop to scoop, say, 15 times, because I want about 15 times water to coffee ratio. I could scoop 15 times. But water takes up more space than coffee, so that wouldn't work so well either. So what I figured I needed to do was figure out just how heavy a scoop really is. Our coffee today is the Mount Apple Paramount coffee. This is roasted by the Good Cup Coffee Company. It's a red and yellow bourbon in Catimore. Natural process. From my experience, this coffee is very delicious, very aggressively sour. If you don't like sour coffees, you might not like this. But the green apple flavors, and here it says green mango, for me it's a green apple. The green apple flavors are very intense and very pronounced on this coffee. But let's use it to find out how much a scoop of coffee is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this scoop and I'm gonna measure a number of times out and see if I can come up with an average weight for whenever I scoop some coffee in. Now I'm going to scoop my coffee the same way every time. Make sure that it's level across the top as much as possible. So from our little experiment, we found that our scoop gives us about 10.4 grams of coffee each time. Sometimes it goes all the way up to 11. We had that one time where it went down to like 9 point something, but that seemed like an outlier and more likely a mistake in the way that I was scooping the coffee. So what I did was I standardized the way I was scooping the coffee, making sure that it was level each time and I couldn't see any gaps in the coffee. And when I did that, pretty much each time it was somewhere between 10.4 and 11 grams. So we can say more or less that we're gonna get for sure about 10.5 grams with each scoop from this scooper. So now that we know that we're getting 10.5 grams of coffee out of our scoop, we're gonna now take 10.5 and multiply it by 15, and that gets us to 157.5. So let's just round down to 157, and we're going to try and see how much water is 157 ml inside of our Aeropress. Here's how we'll do that. We're gonna open up our Aeropress and pull the plunger somewhere here in the middle. I put it between the 3 and the 4. Then I'm gonna tare my scale. Then I'm gonna put the 157 ml of water into my Aeropress so I know I can kind of figure out how high that's supposed to be. All right, so that's 158 ml. We're kind of eyeballing it with this particular brew method. I'm gonna use my scoop and I'm going to pull up the Aeropress until the water is aligned with the bottom of my scoop line. You can see that the line lines up with the top of the circle of the 4. All right, so that's gonna be our mark. Now that we know those things, let's boil some water on the stove. We're not gonna use this kettle. We'll boil some water on a pot and figure out if we can make a great cup of coffee. All right, so we're back, and I actually remeasured this, and what I found was that when you align the width of the spoon to the numbers on the Aeropress, it actually lines up with the bottom of the circle on the 1. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to put enough water to go from between the bottom of the circle of the 4 to this end of the circle of the 1. We're doing it inverted, so I guess it's the top of the circle of the 4 to the bottom of the 1, and that's gonna give us round about that 157 ml that we wanted. Our water is fresh off the boil, which means when it was a rolling boil or when it just started boiling, it was 100 degrees. So as we're talking now, it's dropping, and hopefully this will be at around 96 degrees, 95 degrees when we pour the water. But again, we're not going to use a thermometer, no fancy 2,000 peso thermometer, no fancy 8,000 peso kettle, no fancy 8,000 peso scale. We're just going to do this eyeballing it, or kind of with our best understanding of how measurement is working, and see if we have a good coffee. I kind of think that part of the point of the Aeropress is to do rock and roll coffee, so we're going to do that now. All right, so I'm going to take 2 filters. I'm going to put it in my filter cap to prepare it for when we are brewing. And then we need something to push our Aeropress into. Now, some people push into a range server, something like this. Do not make Aeropress into one of these. I don't care how borosilicate your glass is, how fancy it claims to be, how thick it claims to be, you will eventually break one of these. Just, there's really no point. Definitely don't use a fancy one like this Kalita Jug 400. Don't need one of these. You could maybe use one of these. Now this is a rocks glass, and these are relatively inexpensive, and they are sturdy and thick. And you won't feel so bad if you break one of these. But also they're generally sturdy enough to be able to hold the weight. Now, ideally, I usually recommend that someone uses one of these. And this is a milk steaming pitcher. You can get these really inexpensive, around the same price of a carafe, but this is made of metal, and it'll definitely hold up to the pressure of the Aeropress. However, because we are not going to use a kettle today, we're actually going to use this to pour the water in, so we have some control. And for that reason, we're going to be pushing our Aeropress into our cup today. Let's do it. And put 1 leveled scoop into our grinder. Now we're going to turn our grind setting to be kind of a medium fine grind setting as far as brews go. And that's because we want to make sure that what coffee we get into here gets fully saturated and fully extracted when we are brewing this coffee. All right, so based on our experience, we're going to trust that this is about 10.5 grams of coffee. We're going to put our hot water into our pouring pitcher, but we're still going to use a timer. Since we're not going to use a timer on the scale, we'll use a timer on the phone. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the water from the line there up to the line on the 1. And so that's our water. We're putting our water in first, and then we're going to add in our coffee, or start the timer and add in our coffee. So this is very similar to adding in coffee into a siphon, where you drop the coffee into standing water. And I'm just going to give that a big stir to get the coffee down into the water. And right away, we are going to close that up. And wait. Now we're really gonna let this sit. We're gonna let it go all the way to 2 minutes before we plunge the coffee out. And that's because we wanna be really sure that we don't accidentally underdo the coffee. It's more likely that you're gonna underdo it. You know, the grind size of the coffee, you're not sure if the water is really hot enough. You're not sure if maybe you put too much water. And for those reasons, you're not sure also that you have enough coffee in there. And for those reasons, we're gonna let it run all the way down to 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 before we flip this thing upside down. We are coming up on 2 minutes 30. So I'm going to now and here now at 3 minutes, we're just gonna push this down. Some light pressure. And we're gonna push all the way through till we hear the hiss. And that's our coffee. Now off the bat, this looks pretty close to the coffee that we brew when we have all of the parameters and the scale. The color, the extraction looks good. This is a very light roast coffee, so we're expecting this kind of orange auburn color. Now the proof, let's taste the coffee. That's good. That's good. It works. It works. Okay. So what did we do there? Now, obviously we did use a scale, but that was just to figure it out. And my point is that when you wake up in the morning, some days you want to go through the methodology of getting the scale and getting the timing right and getting the ratios and all that stuff. And then some mornings you just want to make an Aeropress. So that's what we've done today. We figured out what to do on those mornings, on those times when you don't have access to these kettles, you don't have access to scales, you don't have access to anything but your Aeropress. Maybe you want to take your Aeropress with you on a trip and take none of the other stuff. You just can boil water, make sure that it's hot enough, that's pretty important. Make sure you steep it long enough, and you can kind of get your ratios more or less correct with the volumetrics on your Aeropress. Is this blasphemy? Some baristas might say so, some specialty coffee guys might say so, but you know what? This coffee is at least as good as some of the V60s that I've had of this particular Mount Apple coffee. It's not over extracted, it's not under extracted, it's sweet, it's hot, it's delicious. It's everything I want in a cup of coffee. Especially if I don't have to put too much work into it. Man, I really feel like this is getting back to the heart of what the Aeropress is. Like taking the complicatedness, the complications out of coffee brewing and just being able to have a good cup of coffee anywhere. And it's a little bit rock and roll. I'm actually super tempted to submit this recipe to the World Aeropress Championships. They're doing it all remote this year, so I'll submit the recipe. Add until top of 4 circle, use scoop to measure water. That would be something if we actually got somewhere in a competition doing this stuff. All right, so what do you think? What do you think of our anti-ultimate Aeropress technique, anti-ultimate Aeropress recipe? I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever done anything like this? Have you been considering doing something like this? I'd love to know. Let me know down below. Or send me a DM on Instagram. I'm at Kayo on Instagram. You can follow at Honeycomb Manila on Instagram and at Daily Drink Mag for all of our content about coffee and cocktails and drinks and beverages. All right, I wish you guys good luck. I wish you guys good health. I wish you guys great coffee. Peace.